All right, joining me now, head coach of the Alcoa High School Tornadoes out here in Alcoa, Tennessee, East Tennessee champions, Brian Nix, first time on the program. Coach Nix, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Chase. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Are you still thinking about last season at all? Have you moved completely forward? Is there still some stuff you'll go back and you'll be like, man, that was cool? Like you'll go back and watch something on film, go back and check at a certain moment from last year. Or have you turned the page 100%?
Yeah, I think you never turn the page, especially in a year where we lost such a close game to West.
Mm-hmm.
And you always look back at you. To me, any good coach is going to look back. Okay, how could I have altered the outcome of that game? You never blame it on kids. You never blame it on situation. You're always 2 or 3 calls here or there, and that's all. 3-point game against the undefeated 5A state champions. That's how it goes. So. You're always trying to look back and see, okay, what could we have done better to service our kids better in that situation? And even the state championship game, even though we won by 19 points, East Nashville scored 26 points on us. Mm-hmm. And so being a defensive guy, I'm always looking on. There's always was it a matchup problem? Was it a schematic error? Was it a technical error or something? And I think that's, as a good coach, you want to look back. Did we not work a technique? Did we not drill a technique that could help our kids be successful? Was there a scheme that we put our kids in the situation? And we knew going into that game that scheme-wise we were going to be a little weak in the run game. They had 2 really good receivers, and we kind of pretty much decided that we weren't going to let them score fast. We were going to try to make them drive the ball, move the ball down the field. Try to do some movement up front to try to get some negative yardage plays, but just not let them throw the ball down the field because we didn't have really any good one-on-one matchups. So when you're having to double cover 2 receivers and the team can run the quarterback, you're going to have some issues. Now, we were also blessed in going to the game. I felt like we'd score some points. Our offensive staff is unbelievable, and they're always going to put us in a good situation. And I felt like that we could score some points, and because of that, we could be patient on defense and not feel like that we had to win every possession, and let some plays come to us for sure.
Well, you mentioned in another interview talking about just obviously you being a defensive guy, the importance of linebackers being the quarterback of the defense. So when you're going up against stuff like that against East Nashville or West, how critical was your linebacker play all year long to doing what you needed to do defensively?
I think that's something I've gotten better at as a coach, is how to coach those guys on tipping off plays. Is a guard sitting light? Where's the tailback? Is he behind the quarterback? Is he in pistols? Is he in front of the quarterback? Is the H-back wide or tight? So, when I was young, I thought you had to make all these great calls, right? You had to make this perfect call, this perfect pressure, which really, if you'll just run a couple of pressures in your base defense and teach kids to get the answers to the test before they start. And I think that was something that we did a really good job. I had 2 really cerebral kids, Aaron Davis and Braden Cornett, who were pretty much full-time linebackers. And so I had them all the time. And so you're able to do a little bit more with guys like that. And they pretty much get our whole defense lined up. And so when you're in a situation, especially East Nashville did a really good job of tempo. When they would get a play over about 5 or 6 yards, they were going to line up and run that same play again. And it really, as a coach, then it's out of your hands. You be the guy to, hey, we're going to check to a pressure here. We're going to play the same call. What are we going to do? But you can do a little bit more and not allow them to vanilla your defense if you've got some linebackers in there who can get everybody lined up, who can get the calls made. And I think a lot of it's just being confident. I always tell them it doesn't matter what you call, as long as we're all playing the same thing, we got a pretty good shot. Like I always say the secondaries, as long as all 4 of us in the secondary are playing the same coverage, it may not be perfect. They may get 12 yards, but we're probably not going to give up a free release down the field for a touchdown. The same way with if everybody in the front's playing the right gap, okay, they may break a tackle. They may knock somebody down. They may get 8 or 12 yards. But usually when you see that 50-yard run that bursts down the middle of the field, somebody didn't fit a gap right, or they thought they were fitting a gap right, but a defensive end was playing one front, a linebacker was playing another, and nose was playing another. And that's when, so just getting those guys to be confident, hey, if you're not sure what we're going to play, get everybody on the same page and we'll line up and play, and it'll be good enough until we can get the right thing called.
What's the biggest difference between limiting explosive plays at the high school level versus the college level you found?
I don't know. I think anymore it's getting to be very similar. I think that you have got to get tackles for losses anymore. I think that's trickled down from, I know that was a big emphasis for Georgia a couple of years ago. they had, Greg Williams and some of those guys came in who had led the NFL in tackles for loss. And it's gotten to be in the last 3 or 4 years that you need to call pressures in the run game. 5 to 10 years ago, it was line up, make them keep snapping the ball. They're going to make mistakes. Well, anymore, if they keep snapping the ball, what they're going to do is score because they're going to get that ball out in space. There's just high school offenses can execute so much more than they could in the past. I mean, I always say, back when George Quarles was at Maryville, a lot of people ran a lot of offense. They could execute a lot of offense. I think Maryville still does a really good job if they execute a lot of offense. But I think you're seeing more and more offenses in high school. I think that's because of huddle. That's because of technology. Kids, you can condense a lot of things down, but they can execute a lot more scheme. And if you keep letting them snap the ball, eventually they're going to be right. They get coached well too. If it's a good team, they have good players. And so I think it's became a point of emphasis to try to get tackles for loss, to try to get those teams off the field. And I think that's any level of football. I mean, I think in the NCAA last year, it was like any drive where you had a tackle for loss, I think the score rate was about 20%. And I think that's something that you look at is drive efficiency. You say hold them to 100 yards rushing and 250 total yards. Well, those metrics are gone.
Yeah.
Like when you're against a good offense, we always say when we play a really good offense, if you can keep them under 21, you've probably done your job. I mean, if they're skilled, they're athletic, and they've got a good offensive coordinator, a guy who's going to attack your weaknesses, there's only going to be so much you can do. And then some, and that's why turnovers are huge. Pursuit is so big in any level, but in high school, I think you got a greater propensity to miss an open field tackle. We work open field tags. The first thing when I talk to college coaches, what are you doing to drill open field tackle? What are your coaching points? But still, in the end, some of the best guys I've ever had weren't great because of a drill I did with them. They would just absolutely, from their sophomore year, would go in there and just knife people on the ground. There's less of those guys. Whereas you go to a Division I school, you got more of those guys who are better open field tacklers. But then you also run into the problem of you get guys who are better open field runners too.
Yeah.
But I think pursuit is so big in high school football because on the perimeter you're gonna miss tackles. I don't care what you do, that first guy's gonna miss. So if you can turn that, he misses and they get 8 yards as opposed to he misses and they get 30 yards. That's all the difference of that guy getting up off the ground and running to the football. And I think that's something our kids do an unbelievable job of is playing really hard. And that's when effort comes in. Defense is so much about you got to get lined up right. You've got to look at the right person. It can't just playing hard is not going to win you a championship. It's just not, especially anymore. But once the play breaks down, once the ball's out in space, then it comes to a lot of times those are when those effort plays happen. That those guys will just run. And you see that guy, he made a tackle for a 6-yard gain, but you go back and film and you watch, okay, we won by 4. If that guy doesn't make that tackle right there, that guy probably scores. And then we lose by 4. And I think those are always those hidden stats that get overlooked in football.
Yeah, and it also, I mean, there's 2 things there. So I don't know if you're a big NFL guy, but when you look at, I mean, I'm a Falcons guy. I'm from Atlanta originally, and Arthur Smith is ground and pound when he's like, we're gonna run the piss out of the ball is what he said with what he's trying to do here with Bijan and Cordero Patterson and Tyler Algier and stuff. But you see the Niners and what Kyle Shanahan's built and all those different variations of the Shanahan offense with their scheme. It seems like because sports is cyclical, that we've gone so, like, it was just pace and space, right? Everybody was trying to put their athletes out on the perimeter and just bet on you not being able to tackle them and just find their guys. And we're going to target them 13 times a game, especially at the high school level, because it's just, they don't have an answer. So why overcomplicate it? There's nothing they can do with this guy on the outside. Now there's an advantage to being the more physical team, that we're going back to kind of this physical style. And it kind of speaks, I think, to what you're talking about, where now tackling is just so important now. And the teams that cannot handle the physical teams are just going to get blown out because there's an advantage to having a physical offense, having guys who are not afraid of contact, guys who will go after you, and guys who are going to try and break tackles, because tackling, I think, and I wonder if you've seen this at the high school level, has never been worse across the board, because you read the NFL and you talk up to coaches in the college and NFL level. It's not as good as it once was from 15 years ago. Tackling is just not, there aren't as many great tacklers as there used to be. So there's advantage, right?
I think is the style of offense.
Yeah.
Before, when you had all 20 guys in a 10-yard area and you ran the lead, right?
Mm,
So that linebacker fills up on that fullback, that tailback bounces. That safety has to make that tackle in a
mm,
2-yard space with all these guys around him. Now on the snap of the ball, the offense is pulling a guard. They're showing zone to the left. They've got 2 blockers. They're throwing a perimeter screen to the right.
mm,
And one guy with all that space with the blocker on him has to. And so I think the tackles that you have to make now are more difficult.
mm,
I think it's, and some people talk about the physicality. I think the game is just as physical. I mean, I
mm,
really do. I think not being able to lay a receiver out over the open. Oh, that's old school football. That's soft football. Well, if that's your kids, that what you want to happen to him? To me,
mm,
if that saves the game, if we can't, some dude running unmolested down the field and he goes up for a ball and we just shoulder lay him out. If we have to give that up on defense to save football, because it still comes down to striking and beating blockers
mm,
and blocking people. It doesn't matter if it's a Y on the perimeter with a screen, if it's a guard on an inside zone. The teams that are really good at all the perimeters, and I call it perimeter run game. When the ball goes fast to the perimeter, they will block your butt on the perimeter. And the teams that are good at defending it are the guys who will shed blockers, strike blockers, get off, and make you consider where you're not going to get that 20-yard gain. You throw that ball out there, it looked really good. You got 3 yards, and you're going to have to block me over and over again. And I think you see. It's a point of emphasis with Tennessee. I think they've done a really good job last year for all the down the field throws and all the credit that they got. You watch their guys; they block really hard on the perimeter. They're working really hard for some 5 or 6 yard gains out there. And you see people now. You're double teaming on the perimeter.
mm,
You got a Z and a wide receiver who are double teaming an outside linebacker when you throw a flare out there. And it's a true combo block. Like they're comboing to the safety. And so I think it. Because tackling, I don't know that it's ever been taught or worked more. We work some aspect of tackling year round. I promise you, you go to Knoxville in January, everybody has, I think that's the big thing, how to tackle without pads. We always say that I think our best tackling drills are done without pads because it's about eye discipline. It's about leverage. It's about body control. Because that kid that will hit is going to do that. All right. And then that kid that doesn't love contact, then you've got to give him a way that he can get people on the ground. What is a way? Okay. Because it's probably less and less of just, once again, that big inline coming on shot. A lot more. I'm coming in an angle. I wrap the near leg. I roll. It's a lot more single leg wrestling, a lot more rugby style tackling. And I think that's really good because you can still have some violent physical contact. If it was my son, I could live with a separated shoulder. I don't want a broken neck, right? Yeah. So if his body gets hurt, that's part of playing sports. But I think we've done a really good job of, you see less and less of kids dropping heads, those head-on collisions, but you still can get big hits. You can have really physical brand of football, but just, not being ignorant about it, just being smart about how we do it. Now, I think kids buy into that. They know when you're trying to, the reason you're playing football is because you like hitting people. Right. That's the difference between it and every other sport is you get that physicality. Let's give them a way to be physical, but let's also give them a way to get better at that without having to beat on them 3 or 4 days a week. There's a lot of times where we'll go pads once a week, and I think we're a really physical football team.
During the season?
Yeah, during the season. Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
But we do inside drill with no pads on. We do tackle circuit with no pads on. We do perimeter drill because if you take care of each other, and it's about hand placement, it's about angles, it's about eyes, it's about then you've got those few kids where you are trying to develop a level of physicality. Well, on those days when you're in pads, you give those kids a little more work. David Sweetland, our offensive coordinator, always says, once a dog shows you it'll bite, don't make him do it every day. And I think that's a great, this guy, I know he's going to hit. So where is he deficient? Where does he miss his tackles? Well, he usually misses his tackles because he's just trying to lay somebody out, right? He's flying across. So he's the guy that really needs to work those unpadded tackles, about aiming the shoulder pad, about getting the near foot up, about getting his head behind you, all those little things. And so it's much more than just beating your chest and saying your team's tough. But I think it's okay because I think a lot of times with missed tackles, it's so individual as to why a guy, where some guys, they miss the tackles, they don't want the contact. Yeah, they come in and they are slacking. Whereas We got guys who, man, they will throw their body in there, but that's what they'll cause you miss sometimes. And we got guys that, man, they're just praying that guy falls down, and so then I think that's where you do some more padded tackling with those guys, teach them to finish on to, we have crash pads out there, and you try to identify the individual weaknesses so that you can make that individual player better.
I like it. What's been the biggest change for your summer kind of program versus when you first started coaching? What has been something that you've changed a lot over the years?
We definitely do more football now, more installation. There was a span there where in June you couldn't do any football. You weren't supposed to have a football out. It was just strictly agility and running and lifting. So you would try to do as much football skill work as you could without a ball. So you're still trying to backpedal, you're trying to lineman, their steps in their down block, do as much agility training. But I mean, a lot of times we'll come out of June with our entire offense and defense already installed. And then we'll come back in July, install it again like we've never installed it before. And we had already installed it in spring. So we always feel like by the time we come to our first game, we've installed our base defense and offense 3 times. And then that's when what you do is about 2 weeks before the game, you start pulling stuff out. Okay, what do we not have down yet? What are we struggling with? What are the things that we need to throw out until later on? Something we may save for a later game. Something that coverage you're struggling with, and we really wanted to run it. But look, we've been working this for 2 months and not made much headway. What makes us think maybe this was put on the back burner and learn to coach it a little better. I think we've always in the summer tried to get outside as much as we can. I think that's something that started, when John Reed was at Alcoa, and those kids had never had an organized weight program. So we had went like 4 or 5 months of just straight lifting. And John was like, man, if we don't get these kids out of the weight room, they're all going to quit. They were. And so we did a bunch of just outdoor strength training stuff, carrying kegs, flipping tires, pushing, just there was really no rhyme or reason. We just wanted to do anything that was strength based, was physical based, to get them out of the weight room. And then we evolved that.
Did it work?
What's that?
Did it work?
Oh, we won a state championship.
Yeah, that seems pretty good.
we had some really good players in too. Warren, Dustin Lindsay, Ray Sykes. We had some studs, so that helps. But I think what it helped was break the monotony. But the thing, I think that the unintentional effect was and I say knock on wood because it could always happen, but we have very few heat related issues because we are outside the majority of time in June and July. So so we will do some, but we're in the weight room maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Now we're still strength training, but we're doing it on the field as far as pushing sleds, pulling sleds, ropes. But they're outside, they get acclimated to that heat, and we can slowly build. So like last week was just a few sets and short yardage, whereas those sets and yardage will build up. And that's where, you talk about being in shape. Well, we don't want to be in shape to play a game. When's our first practice day? July 22nd. Right? We want to be in shape enough to execute about 25 or 30 full speed snaps at practice. And then by the end of that week, we'll scrimmage McCauley, and everybody will get about 30, 35 snaps, and then we'll slowly ramp that up. But I think it's definitely more organized. And what I've tried to do is with what we started with John was to use some more organization about, are we breaking this up in movements? Are we breaking this up into body parts? How are we measuring volume? I think we're much more intelligent about how we, with skill guys, they could run miles in a day. If you do 7-on-7, you do a 30, 40 minute 7-on-7. There's some guys that have ran 2 or 3 miles in that 30 minutes. And some of those miles are ran at 80% or more top speed. So I think we're much more intelligent about, once again, just not beating your eye. We're going to just get tough. Just get over, and we do all velocity based training in the weight room. We use, push GPS devices to try to measure bar. If you see this guy who is a strong guy who works hard, he eats, and all right, for 2 straight weeks, his bar speed has been dropping. There's an issue there. And I think your best and your hardest working kids are your best barometer. If you see them start to struggle, you see they look fatigued, they look tired. And it's not just your most talented kids, but your kids that do all the recovery, all the stuff that they need to do. I think that's always a good sign to look at, and that's when you need to pull back. And I think Brian Mann is a guy I respect a ton. He says, him and Chris Corfus say, don't burn the steak. Just slow cook it, and you can progress up. But you'll see some summer programs that are bloodbaths. I
Yeah.
mean, guys puking in a trash can. I've just never seen a need for it. And
Yeah.
to me, it would just make me hate playing football. And I just don't see a benefit. That's not what football is. It's not how the game's played. And I'm not, if that's your method, and there's guys who won a whole lot more games than me doing it that way. But I just think anymore, kids want to know why.
Mm.
They want to know why. They'll do hard stuff, but look, we're going to do this, and here's the reason why. This is going to make you a better player. This is going to, but just in general, doing hard things, if they can't see it directly translated into them playing better, them having more success, you'll lose them. And then when you need to push them, you need to call upon them, they don't trust you. And so I think it's incredibly important to earn player trust anymore because they all question, and they're not going to do it just because. And they have so many other things they can do. If you don't make it palatable, if you don't make it an enjoy. Now, the work's not, it takes what it takes. Nick Saban always says that. You tell me what you want, I can tell you how to get there. But I also believe you don't have to make their life miserable in the process. You can hold them accountable. You can coach them hard. You can make them be on time. But when they're 2 or 3 minutes late, that doesn't mean you have to berate them. You may have some accountability. You may, however you handle it. But when a kid blows an assignment, when a kid's loafing, they're still out there. And I think that, and there's a time to coach aggressively and to get on. I think we all need, and there's some kids that respond really well to that. There's some kids that, man, when you get on them a little bit, man, they'll respond. There's some kids that completely shut down. And I think you have to have the maturity as a coach is to know, all right, this kid, if I yell at him, even if I'm not negative, but if I yell at him across the field in front of all his peers, he's going to shut down. And so he's the one I got to walk over, get in his ear and say whatever I need to say, good or bad. But if so you can say, well, I'm going to do it my way, or you can do it what's best for the kid. And I think that's what it really comes. And I think it's helped me too since I had kids. My son doesn't even play football; he's a soccer player.
Yeah.
I think just seeing how the best coaches that coach them and how they interacted, and I love seeing a coach when they're struggling a little bit. You get onto them, but you also see that coach who's going to push them, who's going to hold them accountable, who's also going to give them, you give them a strategy. It's going to help them succeed. We were at a scrimmage and I heard a coach yelling at a kid saying, you got to stay behind him. You can't let him run by you. And I'm like, well, yeah, no kidding. Tell the kid how to do it.
Yeah.
Is he getting out of his shuffle late? Is he not getting his eyes on the hip? Is he turning? Or sometimes, we were in practice the other day. We were doing red zone one-on-one, and one of our guys made an unbelievable catch, and our DB looked at me and I said, dude, ain't nothing you can do about that.
Yeah.
That's a touchdown. They don't let them down here in the red zone. And I think that some of that too is another team score. East Nashville walked the opening drive, and I told our guys, I said, look, we cannot simulate their speed. Okay. So it's going to seem really fast early. It'll slow down. And I think I've seen that over the course of my career. And they take the opening drive, march it right down the field and score. And so and I'm just like, man, look, we're going to be, I told you this might happen. We're going to be okay. They're well coached. They got good players. They weren't intimidated by us. And so I think if you practice that mentality, then when it happens in a game, the kids aren't rattled by it.
We're two-parter here. Where are you feeling the deepest on your roster going into summer ball, and which position battle are you most excited to see play out over the next couple months?
Yeah, I think our depth is definitely in our receivers and secondary. We've got some really good skill guys. We've got some good older ones. We've got some really good. It's probably as much depth and skill position of an eighth grade of an upcoming freshman class as we've ever had. Really a big class for us. 25, 26 kids for a school of 700 kids. That's a huge class. You look like this. I think this current senior class is 10 or 11. So that's a big class for us. And so I think the depth there is going to really pay off. Offensive line has been our thinnest position just because we graduate 2 Power 5 tackles. You graduate an offensive, all-state center in Riley Long. And then we had a really good sophomore coming up who's having Tommy John surgery. He was a pitcher. So you're really just looking at, you got Isaiah Emmert, who did a great job for us last year as a sophomore and really done a really good job in the spring of trying to be a leader with that group. Really appreciate how he conducted himself in spring. He was a state qualifier in the disc, still came out and was at spring ball. And so we're going to have some young guys. And I think we've got some good young ones. We got the John Sperling's guy's going to be a senior who had a great spring, and he's never played for us, but he's been behind some really good players. But he's a guy that's just I think he's a credit, and a lot of those guys, to Alex Taylor and Brian Gossett, our offensive line coaches, and how they work with them. We don't. I think we do an excellent job of not just working with those front five. But Alex Taylor, really took that second group, and our second O-line runs all our scout teams. But we always say it's not a scout team. He's over there coaching any play that was similar to what we ran. It was in our terminology. He's coaching those guys because he kept telling them, look, this time a year from now, you're going to be having your shot to start. And I think a lot of them are seeing those dividends pay off. So I think we can still be really good in the offensive line. We're just young. It's just unproven. But I was extremely happy with how they played in that PAL scrimmage against a pretty athletic defense, against a defense who was showing us some different looks. You don't really prepare for a scrimmage. So really have to trust your rules and just block your responsibilities. I thought we did an excellent job there.
I love it. Last thing, and then I'll ask you a couple of fun non-football questions real quick here. I'm always curious about this when it comes to championship teams. Obviously, Kirby Smart was able to talk his guys into believing that everyone thought they were going to go 7-5 last year, and they believed it. Like, they obviously knew that they were not going to go. No one's thought that the 2022 Georgia Bulldogs were going to go 7-5 last year. But when you're the most talented team every single Saturday, it's hard. When you won, it's hard. It's like the disease of me, right? That Pat Riley talked about with the Miami Heat and the Los Angeles Lakers and New York Knicks from decades of NBA experience, where winning is great, but staying on top, like reaching the same guys, being able to get them, hey, last year was cool, but last year is last year. No one's just going to hand us back-to-back state titles. Like, is it, I guess my question broadly speaking is just like, do you change your philosophy? Do you have to change how you coach these guys based on what happened last year? Because it's unique. Only one team wins every year. And there are still a significant number of guys who are on that team who experienced that title. How do you get them to just have that same fire burning that they had a year ago?
I think you handle it player to player and game to game. I think that's so if you ever lie to them once, if you go in and say, look, we're better than this team, but this team is going to come out and give you a go for a while. Yeah. Like, if you will just hold in there and play, you're probably 2 or 3 touchdowns better than this team. But if you make mistakes and you allow them to believe, because they believe right now they can win, you make some mistakes, you allow them to believe they can beat you. And then sometimes you say, look, this team can't beat us. How are you going to play? The point is to not go out and just to be sloppy and to be undisciplined and beat this team who that you're way better than. Are you going to go out and look? Would someone look at how you played tonight and know who you're playing? And that's what I always say on a Tuesday practice. You should know if it's the state championship game, if it's the Maryville game, who we're playing. It should show up and it should look the same. Our tackling drill look the same. Our team periods, so the communication, the coaching, everything should look the same because we're trying to prepare to be and it's a cliche term, but we want to be the best possible team we can be. Yeah. And that is a week to week thing. And, Jody Wright is a guy I have, Jody, the head coach at Fulton. Yeah. And I have won a ton of state championships, but just a guy I have a ton of respect for and how he treats kids and, just dealt with a lot of kids who've had a lot of issues in their life and been like a dad to them. And he said to me one time, he said, everybody either battles adversity or complacency, right? You're always battling once. Either you got beat by 3 touchdowns or you got beat by 3, right? You felt like, man, we were right there. We could have won it. Or you just won by 3. And I think, that was us coming off the Maryville win. It was a very challenging thing because I knew coming up 2 weeks later, we had a West team that on film to me looked like one of the best teams we had played in 5 years. I mean, they just Lamar. I said, you guys look like a state championship team. Big physical offensive line, steady quarterback play, 2 really good backs, receivers get it down the field. Just fast on defense, just don't make mistakes in the kicking game. And I don't know if our kids ever really, I was like, look, if you go in there and not expecting a war, then going to be caught off guard. And I think we did not go into that game complaining. I think that's the one time I did not do a good enough job of trying to convey that message. Whereas I thought we did a really good job at Maryville of in that game, there's always these emotional highs and lows. And I felt like that in the past that we didn't do a good job when we had the lows. We kind of got that, here it goes again. Because, the bottom line is, I think we've played them, 85, 90 times and won like 30 of them.
Yeah.
So if you look at the law averages, it's hard to beat them anyway.
Mm.
When you're a smaller school, it's hard to just making our kids understand, look, they are going to make plays. Some things are
Mm.
going to go wrong for us. If we will just keep playing, we'll have a chance at the end. So I thought we did a really good job. But I think it's such a game to game, how your team is progressing, the individual issues that you're having. Sometimes you see kids that are getting along really well. You try to foster that. Sometimes you see, man, some factions starting to develop.
Mm-hmm.
So how you address those with the individual. And I think it helps. We've never had like a leadership council, but those 4 or 5 guys that you can go to test the water temperature.
Yeah.
What's going on? How's everybody feel? How's, what's everybody saying to you? What do you hear in the school? How do you feel, when you have individual player issues? I think it's always been when we're looking at discipline a player, maybe suspending, maybe removing a player, I always think those kids are the best barometer of how do you guys feel about this guy? Do you feel like he's a good teammate? Are you guys willing to grant him some grace? Because we're almost ready to get rid of him.
Yeah.
And so I think that, with game preparation, I know it's a little different than your question, but I think it's so much just I think that's the art of coaching. The science is the what do you do on 1st and 10, what steps and reps you do in the weight room, how you organize your practice. But the art is, okay, look, we just had 2 knockdown dragouts games this week. We're going to do in pads this week, we're an hour and 20 minutes. Y'all give it to me. An hour and 20 minutes. We'll go back in the gym. We'll do walkthroughs and trying to find those little things that motivate them, that give them some new life, that break up that monotony. I think it's so, and we have any coach on this staff could be a head coach. That's where I'm so blessed. I have an unbelievable staff. And so they know I'm open to suggestions. If they say, hey, we're David Sweetland will come over to me and he'll say, man, you got to do this last period. And I said, nope. And he was like, kill it. We're dragging, kill it. We need to go home,
Yeah.
and it's not like when they're being lazy. It's just like for whatever reason. And sometimes kids, man, they're all day long. They're doing geometry. They're doing English too. They're doing AP physics. And then they got to come out here for 2 hours in the heat. And so, but yeah, I think just, there's a ton of books about achieving excellence, not many about maintaining it. Right. So I think that's always the challenge is how do you, what are the issues? Are they resenting the work? Are they thinking that the game's already going to be won? Sometimes they look into it, and then things go wrong and you have to prepare them for that. So we always talk about make friends with the worst possible outcome. I always anticipate that there's going to, but I think you also have to be honest with them. If you look on film and you're like, okay, we're 2 touchdowns better than this team. I think when you tell them that, and then you come down 2 weeks later and say, look, this team's every bit as good as us. It will take all we've got to beat them. Then they trust that. They trust you. Because anymore, the kids, they can get online. They can watch highlights. They can see scores, and they know whether, but when you're honest to them about, hey, this is what it's going to take to win this game. Here are going to be the problems. And here's what we're going to have to do to be successful in this game. And when that comes to fruition, then you earn their trust.
Yeah, look, this is exciting. I think as a coach, it's got to be fun too with you going into this year because reaching the mountaintop is obviously where you want to do. But like you said, I love that point where it's just there aren't as many books. There isn't as much information about dealing with being on top and staying on top because only one gets there each and every year. There's so many other people that are clawing and trying to find ways to get to the top. All the self-help books are like how to reach your goals.
Great, right?
Yeah.
Good to great. It's all the, how do you get there?
Yes.
Right? Climbing the mountain, right?
But that's exciting, right? Like if you're a curious person, if you are just like, I just think that's a really cool thing. And I think you have a great attitude heading into this year. Well, Coach, how do good folks here in East Tennessee watching here on YouTube and everywhere else, how can they support the Alcoa Tornadoes this summer going into summer ball and the season? Only 2 months from now? It's
I think we
scrimmage
Macaulay on July, 27th, 28th.
There you go. Parson General coming in there. That should be fun.
Yeah. So we have, we scrimmage Macaulay and Bradley. So we don't, there's no lightweights, and then we open up with Ravenwood, Bearden, the team from New York, Tottenville, New York, and then Greenville. So we're going to have to come out of the gates swinging. But the summer is always fun. We have our youth camp tomorrow. We do a free youth camp on Tuesday and Wednesday, 2 days a week during the summer. And so, anybody that's out there want to bring your kids, it's from 2nd grade to 8th grade, and it's free, and it's something that our players run it. And it's always a lot of fun it's not something that, we could run a camp and try to make some money, but we'd rather do it as a service to our kids.
That's awesome.
But yeah, just come out and check us out in our scrimmage, and all Tornado fans, we're going to need to get on the road and be in mass in Nashville here in the middle of August, because that'll be a tough opening game. Ravenwood, if you've ever seen one of their games, their fan base is awesome. I mean, their students, and Will Hester does an unbelievable job. He's their head coach, and Will's been, I don't know how long he's been doing it, but he was killing people with triple option 15 years ago, and he's killed people with spread. He's killed people with 11 personnel, and he evolves and he adapts, and he's one of the best ones in the game. So it'll be, that's what, like you said, it's what we want. We want those challenges.
Yeah.
You want to challenge yourself. You want to push. We're not afraid to lose. We're not afraid. We'd rather challenge ourselves and maybe not always come out victorious, as opposed to and you're just staying comfortable, because you're never going to be the best you can being comfortable. That's for sure.
I love that. And I think Greenville's Rivalry Thursday, right?
Greenville's Rivalry Thursday. Yep. At Greenville. Yep. So
there you go. Well, I will be there one weekend one Friday, or maybe the Rivalry Thursday. We'll see if I can make it over there at that point. But excited to see what you guys do going into a potential back-to-back national or state championship season. You've just really impressive, and I am excited to see what happens here, Coach. Have a good rest of your summer. Take a break, get some vacation in, play some soccer. Shake things up a little bit.
I watch soccer. I do when I do things fast anymore is like pull a hammy or an Achilles.
Yeah.
And so I watch a lot of it.
Well, I'm a distance runner, and I've been doing that for 14 years. And I broke my foot last year. So it was one of those, it's hitting me now. I can't do what I used to do.
Don't get any better as you get older, brother.
No, it's not. That's what they told me. It's like, I'm not LeBron, so they don't treat it like LeBron.
That's right. You're not LeBron or Tom Brady, right? No. Those are first percentile human beings to walk the earth. So.
Yeah. They never said that. Chase Thomas, Tom Brady. It's never been said.
That's right.
No. Brian Nix, thank you so much. We'll have to check back in again soon.
Well done, nephew. Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.